In our previous video, we created a primary key for TinyDB by taking a few steps. First, we created a local variable, initialized it to 0, and then what we did is we add 1 to that variable each time we save a plant, and we save the plant with the tag, which is equal to whatever this number is. So, in other words, the first plant we save is tag number 1, tag number 2, tag number 3, tag number 4 for the fourth plant, so on and so forth. And then what we do is we save the highest number in this max plant ID tag here. Okay, and then when we initialize the screen, we simply read that max plant ID, and if that's a higher number than 0, then we store that as our plant ID variable in memory. That is as confusing as it sounds when I describe it. So I want to try a new thing. What I'm going to do is I'm not going to store the plant ID anymore in the database. So I'm going to remove this, okay? And I'm also going to remove the block down below where we're storing it in the database. Okay, there we go. Get rid of that. We're going to compute the highest value this time instead. So what I'm going to do, let me resize a bit here, reposition so we can see it as best as we can on one screen. I am going to go to our database, specimens, and I'm going to call specimens.getTags, okay? But I want to put that inside of a loop. So I go to Control, and I will say for each item in list, call specimens.getTags. I'm going to say, first of all, we're going to put this up in our initialized block just like so. So for each item, in other words, what this block is saying is for every tag, let's interview every single tag. Okay, now I'm going to make an if test. So I'm going to go to Control, and I'm going to say if, and we're going to get a comparison. So we're going to go to logic. Okay, if item. Let's see if we can drop them in there just like that. If item is greater than, well, I want a comparison though, and that's not giving me a comparison. So let's find a comparison. I don't want an equals. Just a moment. Okay. Let's do like so. How about this one? That's what I want. Okay, just a moment as I refactor here. Refactor means I messed up and I need to fix it. That was a joke. Okay. Whoops, one more. Okay, drag the entire lot just like so. Okay, if the item is greater than our plant ID, then we're going to call set global plant ID to our item. Okay, in other words, what we're doing is we're reading every single tag in the database. If the tag, which is a number, is greater than the number over here, which at this time is 0, then we update this variable to be whatever the tag is. After all of this is done, the variable will have the highest number in the database. So honestly, we don't need this anymore. This is much simpler because we're not storing that highest number in the database as a separate tag. We're simply reading through all of the primary keys, and by applying this logic over and over again to each primary key, we're finding the highest number, and the highest number is what's going to be in this global plant ID. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to go ahead and clear out the database just once, because I want to start with a fresh set of data. So I'm going to call database clear all, and then I'm simply going to go to I'm going to save the project. Okay, and then I'm going to go to the emulator and I'm going to verify that the database has been cleared. It will take just a couple clicks back and forth to clear out the database. And we see now the database is clear. So I'm going to go back to screen 1. And I'm going to remove the clear all. I've just basically deleted what's in the database, but I only wanted to do that one time. So I'll clear all, I'm going to save. And now let's see if our application still will allow us to save maybe 2 eastern redbuds with this sequence that we're using here, this comparison sequence, okay? So I'll go back in, we'll give it just a second to refresh. Okay, now we'll start with description, a lovely tree. And I'm going to say plant name, Eastern Redbud. Okay, location, Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Garden. Okay, fix that, put the B in there, and done. And save this guy. Okay, now let's save another Eastern Redbud, but this time we're going to give it a different location. That's fine, select all and delete. And let's call this one, let's say Kew Gardens, London. Okay, it's actually Royal Botanical Garden Kew, so forgive me for butchering the name just a bit. But what I want to show is I'm keeping the plant name the same, giving it a different location. Okay. Now we saved that once. Now let's make another redbud. Redbuds are fairly common. So we're going to say, for this one, we'll say University of Cincinnati. And done. And save. And let's just see what happens when we create a new tree here. We'll say Ginkgo biloba. Okay. We'll keep that one at University of Cincinnati and done. And then we're going to choose save. Okay, and now open, and we should see the 4 trees that we've created. Just a moment as the screen renders. Sure enough, we see Eastern Redbud, Cincinnati Zoo, Kew Gardens, University of Cincinnati, and we see Ginkgo biloba. Now here's the real question. If I stop the emulator and restart it, or if I just go back to the original screen and I add a new plant with the same name, Eastern Redbud, or let's give it a brand new name. Let's do our Catalpa speciosa. Is it going to be the 5th plant, or is it going to overwrite the 1st plant that we created? Okay, so we'll go back, we'll restart, and in just a moment we'll see what we get. The only caution here is I don't know if the list is going to scroll, so we might not see that 5th entry, but we'll see what we can figure out. Okay, so description, dog friendly. I once had a Catalpa speciosa. It has absolutely beautiful flowers, especially when it gets mature. I love that tree. People don't like it because it has these fruit that look like cigars that drop. We'll put it in my old home of Erlanger, Kentucky. It has this fruit that looks like cigars that drop, and it creates a lot of litter. Not literally litter, but it creates a lot of mess. I had 3 huge catalpas in my old backyard in Erlanger, and the flowers were just beautiful. But then on top of that, my dogs quickly made mulch out of the cigars, the little fruit that would drop. And the tree was so big, it provided them a nice shady place during the summer. So probably one of the best trees you can get if you have dogs. Okay, let's take a look. So this is adding a 5th plant. The question is, will it overwrite what was there before, or will we actually get a 5th plant? The desired behavior is that we get a 5th plant that adds after the first 4 that we created. And sure enough, take a look. Catalpa speciosa, dog-friendly, Erlanger, Kentucky, works just great. Okay, so this is another way to make a primary key. Well, so we did 2 different approaches here. One approach was storing the highest number in the database. The other approach is this one, which is just reading over each row, finding the primary key from each row, store the primary key in a variable, okay? And then, well, actually, I'm sorry, let me step back a second. Start with a variable that's initialized to 0. Iterate over all of the primary keys. If they're bigger than the value in that variable, replace the value in that variable with the primary key. And then repeat. Look at the next primary key. Is it bigger than the last value we stored in the variable plant ID? If so, then replace it. If not, move on. Keep doing that. And after iterating over every single key or tag, we're eventually going to touch each one. And we're eventually going to find the highest number. And that highest number is what's going to end up in this plant ID. So I like this approach better for a small set of data because the database is more pure. For a large set of data, I might stick with the approach I had in the other video, which is where we actually took the highest value of the primary key and stored that in the database under a separate tag name. The only thing I just didn't really like about that one is that then we had to write a little exception in our Save Plant screen, and we had to make sure we didn't mistakenly display that information to the user, because that's information that's purely behind the scenes in the database. So, and by the way, if you're seeing this video and you didn't see the first video was called Creating a Primary Key for TinyDB and App Inventor. And if the upload sequence is right, if you look at my videos page, it will be immediately before this video. So that's it for TinyDB now. In the future, we're going to see how we can retrieve and parse some data from the web, which is going to be a lot of fun. I look forward to seeing you then.